Hello?
Hello?
Hello? Hey, call me Tim.
Okay. How you doing?
Fine, hold on. I'm going to turn the phone up a little bit. I can't quite hear you.
Alrighty.
How are you doing?
Great.
Doing well.
Oh, that's much better, yeah.
Okay.
Did you tell your audience what happened?
Oh, D-Train. I think you need to turn up your mic a little bit. You're kind of distant.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. This new Bluetooth. Okay, is that better?
Oh, much better. Yeah.
We're getting there. Yeah.
Okay. This is a sloppy start to the show. Reckless 2.0 here with Vickiss and D-Train. I'm D-Train, co-host Vickiss. We have a special guest today. He is a educator, professor, author. He is Professor Timothy Parrish. And he's a former Cal cat, Timothy Parrish. Good evening, Professor Parrish.
Hi, please call me Tim.
Yes, sir. So I guess anything, I guess you want to tell the listeners about yourself before we get started?
Well, I actually first wanted to know how you're doing. Did you tell them? Did you tell your audience what happened?
No, not yet. So
okay.
The reason for the sloppy start of the show is because I just came back from the urgent care to get some stitches. So kind of lost all my show prep, and now I can barely type. So I've been moving kind of slow tonight, but hopefully we can compensate for that.
I hope you're feeling. I hope they gave you some good meds. So.
Yeah, just a couple stitches.
Well, I don't know if you want me to fill in your audience on what's been going on, if you've told them anything already. But if you'd like me to do that, I can.
Well, yes. And also just anything like about yourself personally, just so you can have a brief intro of you and your work.
Are we on air yet?
We are.
Oh yes, we are.
Oh, we are on air. Okay. So because I'm getting two voices. Okay, the producer and D-Train.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh yes, it's Vickiss. Yes, I'm Vickiss, and the other co-hosts are here at Reckless 2.0, and we're also there's D-Train. So yeah.
Oh, okay, good. All right. So I'm going to make it as sloppy as possible. So
I'm sure.
Well, anyway, I mean, this is a pretty heavy subject. I don't mean coming in and laughing. But I grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and I was raised in an extremely racist home and a racist church. Although, the irony in all of that is my parents were very kind, compassionate, working class people. Took very good care of me. Had very unusual face-to-face interactions with some African Americans. For instance, on the train back from World War II, after my father had been in the Pacific, soldiers on the train were beating up blacks and Jews, and these black guys came from their part of the train and told my father and some of his other Mississippi veterans what was going on. And so my father let this African American guy from Mississippi sleep in his bunk with him for 2 nights, head to foot, while they were going home. And yet, he reveled in the death of Martin Luther King and then both the Kennedys, and just actually in some ways became a more virulent racist as he got older. And the church I was in, we were actually in 2 churches, Southern Baptist churches, and 3 times there were votes not to allow African Americans in. And the votes were mainly out of principle because there were no African Americans who were trying to come to our church. And because of a number of reasons, I got involved in some racist violence when I was in high school, because at the time when our school was naturally desegregating and my neighborhood was beginning white flight. And so I wrote a memoir detailing all that called Fear and What Follows, The Violent Education of a Christian Racist. And after the murder in South Carolina, and I just have to say I don't know how meaningful it is to people all over, but the fact that that flag is coming down tomorrow is a very big deal. I know to African American Southerners, but to me and a lot of people I know in the South. But so anyway, I wrote an op-ed after the murder in South Carolina, and just was talking about how I'd been raised in some of those same indoctrinating circumstances, and the thing went viral, and but I wrote another op-ed for Daily Beast and was on CNN, so it started to get a lot of play, and so I've been talking about this a lot, and at the receiving end of a lot of very great support and a lot of unhappy people. So that's kind of what put me here tonight.
Yes, sir. Thanks for that. So I guess let's get started, like, with the title of your book. And I think this was, I think you were leveraging irony here, but a violent Christian racist. Like, isn't that like a huge contradiction? Absolutely,
and the worst thing about it is it's hugely in play still. I mean, I'm kind of welcome everybody on Facebook, and so I'm still in touch with a lot of the people I went to high school with, and most of them are far right Republicans still, and they're also they would consider very righteous Christians, but they still have this strain of racism in them, and they don't seem to want to confront that at all. It's just this deep and disturbing strain of hypocrisy. And even though I myself went down the wrong road for a long time, I was aware of that hypocrisy from the time I'd say I was 8 years old. And, it's very hard to reconcile, but people have this frightening way of just compartmentalizing things.
Definitely. Your article your op-ed in the Daily Beast. What I was curious. What is the Svengali? I've never heard of that group before, so I just kind of wanted you to explain it. And I actually tried to do some research on it, and I didn't really come up with much. So.
Yeah, well, Svengali was he's a literary character who took control of people. He was he manipulated them, and they fell under his sway. And that happened to me with this guy. I'll just quickly give you the background. When I was 13, I got in this really bad street fight with a white kid and almost got killed. And then this older kid started to stalk me, and it went so far that my brother, who was a cop at that time, a Vietnam vet, went to the guy's house and stuck a billy club in his mouth and told him if he came back around me, he was going to kill him. And that afternoon, the guy came back. And that put the fear pretty deeply in my bones, and, that was kind of hanging over me. And so when I was 15, this incredibly brutal, charismatic racist, the one I was calling the Svengali, moved onto my street. And I just figured if I got in line with him and I, befriended him, it would make me safe. And, of course, just the opposite happened. So I think it played out a lot. People, when they get scared, just like Americans after 9/11, think that if they go hurt somebody else, and especially, people with dark skin, they're going to be safer somehow. And, of course, it's just the opposite. So that guy was my Svengali.
Yes, sir. Vickiss, did you have a question?
Oh, no. Oh, yes. I'm just reading the main thing that popped out to me, especially in the Daily Beast, how I escaped becoming Dylan Roof. I guess just really how you break down the white psyche and the white pathology of the uncivilized invaders. and fighting for your white, your white, your white monetary, your white land and your finances that, for that you're taking your capital and your stability. My question is, I guess, do you see any correlation between that and I guess I want to ask you about maybe gentrification. Do you see any correlation between that and gentrification and how some non-white people might feel about white people moving into neighborhoods? And in terms of, do you have any experience with that, or in terms of opinions on that happening in the opposite direction, and any feelings of from white people when they're moving into quote unquote black neighborhoods, when they're not fleeing and taking their meager capital with them, but actually bringing their immense capital and stability with them to quote unquote ghetto neighborhoods.
Right. Well, that's a lot. Let me try to get in. They well, gentrification is incredibly problematic, and it's always poorer people who are going to suffer because of that. And and of course, in American cities, historically, the people who lose their land are African Americans by and large, and gentrification will happen. It's not always a bad thing to infuse money back into places where a lot of times it's been sucked away because whites moved away and took away a lot of the infrastructure, and government hasn't continued to support those neighborhoods in the way they did before. The problem is not the simple fact of gentrification, but that no consideration is made for the fact that people are going to be displaced, and if they're not overtly displaced right away, their taxes are going to go up because property values are going to rise. And that's where I think there's a huge failure in a lot of towns, and I actually pay attention to that a lot. I see it happening up here in the Northeast a good bit, even in small towns. I think the other part was just kind of whites' nervousness of moving back into African American communities. Was that kind of?
Well, it had to do with, actually relates to how you said that whites have rage and fear, and they were fleeing their white neighborhoods because of the black invaders that were coming. However, what happens to the fear? Where's the fear of the white person going into the quote unquote ghetto and making bringing their money and changing it, even if they're living in the close at least initially within close proximity of black people. Where is that quote unquote fear that white people so desperately have?
Well, I don't have a lot of personal experience with that, and it's also, a newer generation that's doing that. And my hope, in part, is that there's less fear from, people who are probably closer to y'all's generation than to mine, and going back into those places. But I would say as well, I think when you go in, when whites go into any kind of community with a lot of money, they're going to also bring in certain kinds of infrastructure and police support that will make them feel better. But they also, I think, they're sort of, large-scale moves at times that change neighborhoods pretty rapidly so that people will feel safer. But, gentrification's complicated. I'm sure you guys know a lot more about it, living in the city than I do. And sometimes it's just out of necessity, and I think people move in, younger people and people without a lot of means move into those neighborhoods, not really with a lot of fear, because, again, they're not quite as indoctrinated. But, again, the ultimate result is people get displaced, and it's terrible, and it's something we need to deal with.
It certainly does need to be dealt with. I guess one more before I go over to D-Train. It's just, and again, back to the theme of fear, and that I see that a lot in your Cultural Daily Beast. And even earlier, you mentioned that that white people in general fear dark skin. So my question for you is, what is so fearful about dark skin? What makes you afraid of dark skin? What makes white people afraid of dark skin?
Is that a baby in there?
Oh, geez.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
somebody needs to feed that baby.
Yeah. All right.
Well, that's a really complicated question, and it's puzzling to me too. It's a question that can't be answered logically, and I'm going to start with the broad stroke answer that I think a lot of people just fear the other, and I think more particularly in the case of the South, in the case of slavery, and then moving all over because of desegregation and subjugation, I think there's a deep set fear in some whites that if we've done this to people for so long, there's going to be some kind of reckoning. And I don't hear that a lot, but I believe there is a deep fear in a lot of whites caused by the fact that they just think they're going to probably get payback somehow. And I think that's in some ways a logical way to think. The fear my parents had was in our neighborhood was really a fear of outsiders of any kind. And I mean, our church, in fact, disliked or hated almost everybody who was not part of our church in the abstract. And I'm talking about other religions, people of different economic. I mean, they didn't particularly like rich people, but they all voted Dixiecrat or Republican in ways that were going to support, this oligarchy. But when it came down to African Americans, because I think there were sexual fears. They're coming to take our women. I think there was this idea that our culture was somehow going to be eradicated, and you still hear that in the ridiculous arguments about the Confederate flag. So I think they sort of manufactured reasons to justify this fear that I think was really deep set in them out of guilt.
Well, that's certainly understandable. But my question though was about specifically about the fear of the sight of a black person, the sight of dark skin. They might not even be classified, quote unquote, as black, but just as a white person. It's not just that someone's different. They weren't someone's a different religion. Not everybody was being hanged from trees and castrated and raped and all that kind of stuff. My question is what about dark skin itself that makes white people fearful? In your opinion, you said that you yourself had these feelings. So if you could be as honest as possible, like what is your immediate what is your immediate racist reaction to seeing dark skin?
Well, I want to answer both. I'll answer that first, and don't worry about my being honest. That's not going to be an issue. My reaction sometimes is just wariness and a kind of paranoia and expecting the worst, and it's because it was indoctrinated into me from the time from as far as I can remember, as far back as I can remember, because blacks were to be feared and disliked, and any example that the people around me could use to stereotype or fulfill the stereotypes of African Americans, they used. And I think that programming runs very deep. And that programming, then in a larger sense, comes from, this mythology that white culture has built up over hundreds of years. I mean, you've got to look, first of all, when, you're bringing people over and selling them, they're already seen as being subhuman. And so you're going to have a kind of relationship with a whole ethnicity that doesn't classify them as human, and so then classifies them in the most horrible of ways as savages. And that I heard that word is still thrown around in reference to African Americans, and especially, African American violence in particular. I get a lot of feedback using that word. And so, over all these hundreds of years, you get this deep-set mythology that say, blacks are violent, blacks are out to take what's ours. There's no logical basis beneath it, and that creates this fear and this programming. And the thing, finally, the thing is, you can have, I don't know if I wrote this in one of those articles, but I talk to people often, white people, and I say, if you paid attention to all your interactions with African Americans, you will have 1,000 interactions with African Americans that are just like 1,000 interactions with people the same color as you. But if one white person does something that's violent or upsetting or whatever, you don't extend that to all black people. But if one black person does something that fulfills your stereotype, you move that out into all African Americans, and that's the toxic way that stereotyping works.
And speaking of that, I guess from your experience after the Dylan Roof, recent shooting by Dylan Roof, what have you heard white people saying behind closed doors, not publicly, but what has been the temperament from white people in your circles about Dylan Roof and what happened in Charleston?
Well, the conversation among people I know is all over the place because, there's a huge divide among people of my kind of political persuasion and people far right. And, most people are appalled that guy did that. But there are still some people who I'm sure, that these are people who are pretty unhinged, but are glad about that. But so nobody's been justifying that kid murdering those people, that man, whatever he is, murdering those people. But when I start bringing up the issue of racism, which I've been doing a lot, again, I'm getting on the Daily Beast. I brought this up. I get immediately, people trying to deflect from the issue, and what I hear the most, and there are fewer people saying this to me than are appalled and working against racism, but I do still, having put myself out there, I'm getting a lot of feedback in different places, and they don't want to talk about racism. They want to start deflecting and saying, well, what about blacks doing this? What about blacks doing that? And really, at root, what they're doing is making a justification of racism. And I was calling out some people on the radio in New Orleans on a talk show the other day for doing that. And they were furious, but they just don't want to hear that. It's first of all, it's indicative that there's still an intense racist strain in a lot of America, and they don't even believe it's racist. But, I know I'm going on, but I think what's emboldening is there's a kind of conversation and impetus, even among white Southerners, progressive white Southerners, to actively oppose racism, unlike anything I've ever seen before. And that gives me some hope. That sounded like a skeptical
Well, seeing that Michael Slager and Dylan Roof are in the same cell block, and that's giving you, you have hope because there's, some people are just saying things about it, I just think that's very interesting. And also, I would also ask about the humanization of Dylan Roof.
Well, I'd like to, if you don't mind, because I've talked to D-Train a lot about this interview I had with Renegade T, which I found to be an attack and very irrational and unreasonable, even though he's a brilliant guy. But we just skimmed over something that to me is what I'm about, because what I want to do is try to talk to white people about racism and say, look, it's deep in us. We've got to ferret it out. We've got to deal with it. We didn't choose to be that way, but we are that way. And I heard a note of kind of despair in you when I said the word hope, or at least skepticism. So if we could just stay with that a second, because I'd really like to hear what you have to say.
Well, we're actually here to get information from you, of course. But just from saying that that there's some white Southerners like the South is portrayed as the most racist, but it's all over. We're looking at and it's a global system. So if we look at Australia and how the Aboriginal people are treated still to this day, or how people are treated in Canada, or how people are treated in South Africa, or sterilized in Israel, and it just goes on and on and on for hundreds of years. So just for a handful of white Southerners to say on say publicly that they oppose racism, even though they're still white, and still and they're still white in the system of white supremacy, and that gives you, a white person, hope. I mean, that's it doesn't give a person who is getting their vertebrae snapped, or it doesn't help a person who's getting raped by a white cop, or stuff like that, and they can't do anything about it. It doesn't help those people, those victims of racism. It certainly isn't, a few white people, saying things, because a main, tenet of racism, white supremacy, is lying and deception. So, as someone who is highly suspicious of, of white people already, then I'm not, some white people coming out and saying, "Oh, I oppose racism," doesn't give me a shred of hope. And that's why I just said, And that's my answer.
Good. I appreciate that. I mean, there's all of that is completely legitimate. I just wanted to hear what you had to say. I hear you.
D-Train, are you there?
Yes, sir. So
yep, you can go.
I wanted to ask, what was that? Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. So I wanted to ask two questions about the whole Dylann Roof situation. Number one, did you happen to read his manifesto, Tim?
I read a little of it, and none of it seemed unusual to me. I heard that stuff, I'll say, all the time growing up, and it was very common. And in fact, that stuff all came from the CCC, which has been spouting and publishing that kind of stuff since the 40s. So his manifesto. Yep. So it didn't. First of all, I read two paragraphs, and it was sickening, but it was also just so familiar as to be almost a cliche. So.
So my two questions were, and you kind of answered part of one already. Number one is, back when you were out actively, being overtly racist, did you have similar worldviews to Mr. Roof? And then number two, are his beliefs an indictment of mainstream white culture in general, in your opinion?
I missed the second half of the question. Is what?
Are his beliefs, as outlined in his little manifesto, is that an indictment on mainstream white culture on the whole, in your opinion?
Okay. Well, I was definitely buying into some of that stuff, because I started to see myself as involved in this, struggle, and sometimes almost what I was trying to convince myself was a war to keep African Americans from coming to do what I thought was take our neighborhood. So I definitely bought into some of that and acted out in some of that, and it, mostly manifested itself as kind of gang violence. But I never was, I always knew it was wrong. It was a way of trying to make myself feel safe, and also, trying to fit into what I saw as my white culture, and even my family. Part of it was trying to please my father. And so, I bought into that far, but at the same time, one of my best friends was an African-American guy that I was playing basketball with, and I had African-American teachers and other buddies at school, and I could see, and some of them were saying to me, what's going on with you, even though a lot of what I was doing outside school was, I tried to keep hidden from them because I was ashamed of it. I wouldn't say that this is where I disagree with you guys, and this is where I disagreed with Gus. And I'm going to preface it here first, and then I'll get to your question. One of the questions already has implied that all white minds are alike, and they're not. And we're not all actively a part of a worldwide conspiracy to keep dark people down. And I wanted to preface this. Remember, I wrote that long note. I believe that colonialism and European colonialism and American imperialism have greatly punished and continue to punish people of color. We're not all on board with that, but we're not stopping it either completely. And what concerns me is how do we finally, as white people, join with people of color in this country to stop this from happening. I believe we have made some strides, but obviously, our involvement in the Middle East clearly shows that there's still this quasi-Christian imperialist move that is going to attack dark-skinned people and people who are not Christians in a way that we want to make them more like us, which is obviously, has a racist underpinning. So I wouldn't say that, Dylan Roof's manifesto, I'd say, is a fringe statement. But what I said in my articles is I believe that, a lot of the forces that drove him are still deeply embedded in white people because, we're brought up in a white culture with white privilege, with a lot of, with all major media sources run by white people. And so the indoctrination goes on, and by and large, we're also, white people we can insulate ourselves completely from what goes on with African Americans, Latinos and Latinas. So in that way, we have, I would say it's not white supremacy, but it's a supreme privilege of power to be able to kind of construct the world in a way that protects us from a complex view.
We're kind of running out of time. I would definitely like to challenge that if you would like to come back. But
you want to go a little longer tonight, or do you have somebody else coming on?
I do not. I know you said you only had 30 minutes, and I wanted to get to a caller. Seems like we have one caller waiting.
Well, I'll hang in a little longer if you want.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Well, let's get to a caller first.
We're just gonna go. We're gonna go to the calls, and we're just gonna roll with it, and that's that. Actually, we have a caller, Slayer Hater. Your line is open. Yes.
Thanks for having me on. I hope it's not too disruptive to the conversation, but I was hoping the guest could get back to a question that I was asked a few minutes ago, which is the humanization of Dylan Roof and sort of thoughts, opinions, like observations he's seen in like the white community. Because at least from a person of color looking on the outside, it looks like there's a very concerted attempt that even though like he's done like this horrific act, there's been like a very concerted attempt to like even still give him his humanity. People say like, oh, he's a child, he's a kid, he was mentally ill, let's blame it on drugs, etc. Even a simple, like he's a monster, this is deplorable, like he needs to be, tried, found guilty, and executed. No one's, at least from what I've seen, no one's willing to just make those statements and like leave it at that. There always seems to be like a need to like make him human. But those are just like my observations. I was wondering if the guest could chime in.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not my experience that that's what's going on all over the place, but I also am not in touch with a lot of mainstream media. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
I would just say to challenge that. I mean, like the man who committed this act is like definitely like over 18, and even you yourself called him like a kid earlier on the broadcast.
That's because I'm 57.
some of that has like trickled down. Yeah,
no, I hear you, and and just for myself, I mean, I call my students kids too, and they call me on it, because they're about his age. So, no, I don't believe he was a child, and I don't let him off the hook at all. He's a mass murderer. I think there was, some wiring in his brain that made him, go farther than most people of that mindset go. Otherwise, I think that we would have more mass killings of African Americans than we do now, because there's definitely, and especially since Obama's been in office, a huge current of racist hatred and racist groups, and they're not really underground either. The Tea Party, I think, by and large, is indicative of that. But yeah, I think you're right, though. I mean, again, I do think that there's a lack of awareness of how media and white people, by and large, view this guy. And I hadn't seen them trying to let him off the hook, but when you say that, it makes sense to me. I can definitely see that perception. I'm not letting him off the hook.
Okay, just curious. Thank you.
Well, that was a great point. That's a great point. Because you think of it. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking again. It's always trying to think the other way. In fact, I was thinking this today. Just what the coverage would have been like if an African American had gone in and killed a number of people, and you can just imagine the ways in which he would have been stereotyped. Taking the way Trayvon Martin was depicted, even by so-called liberal media at the beginning. I mean, it would have immediately, you would have had these alarms that it was a hate crime and, quote, a racist crime, even though I don't believe in black racism. And then a further extreme, just about media representation, when those guys in Texas, remember last year, a year before, when they had those like 1,000 militia out protecting Clive and Bundy. If you'd have ever had 1,000 African Americans with assault weapons and all that, there would have been Cobra helicopters coming in to kill those people.
If you had even one, right? I mean, there's a YouTube video that was circulating around.
I've seen those, yeah.
Yeah, a couple months ago, and it shows exactly what happens if you're African American. You try to exercise your Second Amendment rights to bear arms.
I mean, they have helicopters flying over my neighborhood every day. So
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, just to kind of piggyback off of Player Hater's point, and Player Hater, your line's still open, about the humanization of Dylan Bruce, and particularly his family. There are two things that really bothered me about this whole thing. One, the judge saying that his family was victims, and number two, Dylan Bruce's sister, apparently her wedding plan got ruined because her brother, decided to be a terrorist. Yeah. Anyway, she started a GoFundMe site to, I guess, to recoup the purchase, to recoup the fact that she had to cancel her wedding or something like that. And just, I just kind of want you to, comment on like this narrative of, these white people being victims. What the judge said, and like how that ties into Dylan's sister, and like, what are your opinions on that?
Well, I'm not going to curse on your show, but the woman's obviously an idiot, just dealing with her in particular. And the judge was talking about Ruth's family being victims. That's what he said? Okay.
That is what he said.
Yeah. Well, I don't know much about his family. I know you want to get to a larger point in this, and I'm sure I agree with your larger point, but I imagine that was a person trying to show some sympathy, for a murderer's family. But again, if you looked at the same situation, I doubt very often if you see an African-American man being, indicted for murder, that the judge is going to take time out to say something about the family. So I definitely think there was a racial element in that.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, even when black people kill other black people, I don't think I've ever heard a judge say that, that the family were victims. It also seemed very interesting to me that, this woman canceled her wedding after the judge said that, his family were victims. It almost seemed calculated to me.
Oh, she did? I don't know any of that. Oh, my God.
Yeah, she canceled her wedding. Even though I don't think she really had to. And then she started a GoFundMe account to raise scores of thousands of dollars for her wedding. So I thought that was all very interesting.
It's perverse.
Yeah, definitely. I also wanted to get your thoughts on, a compare and contrast between the Sikh temple shooting. I don't know if you remember that. That was in 2012 or 2013. And
I do.
This church shooting
in Kansas, right?
Yeah. No, I think the synagogue shooting was in Kansas. I think the Sikh temple shooting was in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Okay.
So the synagogue shooting happened maybe last year. Yeah,
okay.
It was definitely last year. And then there was a shooting in a Sikh temple in Milwaukee in 2013, I believe. And
I remember the shooting.
I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just kind of, it really hit home to me as like white supremacy being like almost a religion, like where you can go into other people's places of worship, and just gun them down for absolutely no reason. And I just wondered, what you thought about that.
Well, the specifically Ku Klux Klan claimed to be a Christian organization, and in their view, Jews, Catholics, and African Americans were all not Christians and of a lesser species and deserved to be killed. And just in the broader sense, I know this isn't getting directly to the point, but I'll get over there in a second. But my personal view is in many religions, historically, violence has been pretty closely associated with them because people want to take their God, or at least a segment of those people, and dominate other people's gods. And I still see that as being a real, and that's, that's why part of the subtitle of mine is, Christian racist. I mean, I wanted to put that out there, and it was a violent education, which is the last thing that should be going on in any church. And then when we attacked Iraq, right off the bat, Bush was talking about the Crusades. That wasn't a mistake. Bush wasn't the best student, but somewhere in his mind, he knew, the history of the Crusades was working in his mind. So, then this, I think that historically there has been a religious and specifically, quote, Christian imperative behind violence against people of color in the United States. And now it's, this paranoia against Muslims. And I would in some ways say that guy may not have even known Sikhs weren't Muslims. Did that answer it at all, D-Train? I'm not sure.
Well, he certainly knew that they he certainly knew that they had dark skin. Maybe it was that.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Well, in fact, I want to go into that fear, just as a tangent. If there's a fear of, and there is a physical reaction, would you agree that there's a reaction to the sight of dark skin in general, an aversion to darkness in white culture in terms of how words are defined? Oh, I had a dark day. Oh, things are just so black. Things of that nature.
Yes.
Okay, and also, would you agree that there is especially now, it hasn't always been this way, especially now that it's considered more attractive if a person is tan, and there's a huge tanning business, and everybody, a lot of white people tan, and there's risking skin cancer, not giving a shit, just to look darker, and there's always complaining of being pale and things of that, and also just I want to ask you, I guess, coming to the question is, how do you think that relates to the recent incident with Rachel Dolezal?
Oh, well, I don't know if I can put all those things together. I mean, again, I know you want to interview me. I don't have much of a theory on that. I'd actually like to hear what you're thinking about it. If you don't want, it's okay, but go ahead.
Well, I'll just ask you, do you have any thoughts on Rachel Dolezal identifying as a black female and the reaction to that? And what have you heard other white people say about it?
Again, that hasn't been I have an opinion. I haven't heard a lot of conversation on it. A colleague of mine, one of the people, a friend of mine, co-teacher, just wrote a great article in Salon, in part about her, talking about the issue of whiteness. I want to just give a plug for that article. Her name is Audrey Alyssa Kerr, Kerr, and it's worth checking out. But she talks about that woman in there. The woman obviously doesn't have a clue. Because she doesn't understand that, any attempt to co-opt, and that's probably the least, aggressive verb I can use, an African-American identity is a complete violation of any understanding of white privilege. Because she's claiming this identity and this appearance that she knows nothing about from personal experience, and so it's it's almost criminal.
And do you believe that if she believes and feels that she is a black female, that she is a black female?
No.
Okay. Well, that's that stamp of approval for by a white person. But I also want to just make the distinction for the listening audience, and just personally, just with the term white privilege, I personally don't use it. I just think that it's not a privilege to be treated like a human being. It's not a privilege to not have your head kicked in. It's not about white people being treated better than everybody else. It's white people dominating and mistreating everyone else.
Yeah, and I'd say, when I use it, I'm thinking even more about, I think you made the sum at the end, just access to capital and getting first consideration and a privilege to ownership, avenues, almost all things in white America that, people of color don't have. And then in that sense, it is a privilege, so in the worst sense.
I would certainly have to disagree that it's not just the term itself. It also dilutes what's really happening. It's white domination. People are being dominated. During the just to go in the Holocaust, go into a concentration camp and be like, oh, this isn't, you guys aren't being, this isn't racism that's happening. This isn't white supremacy that's happening. This isn't Nazism that's happening. This is German privilege. This is Nazi privilege. That's really trivializing how people are treated. This is also trivializing what the issue is, and it also creates confusion about the term. Oh, it's easy to say white privilege, but to say white supremacy, it's too close to Dylan Roof. But it's too close to the truth. It's too close to what's going on this planet.
Right. I hear you.
Yeah, that was part of my pushback from earlier. I definitely, the term privilege is a little problematic to me as well. It doesn't seem to be the most accurate thing. But, like I said, we can agree to disagree on that. Like I said, I'm not really, I wasn't really interested in having a contentious conversation tonight because I thought that you had a lot of information.
This is not contentious.
Yeah.
Just nothing has happened here that's been contentious, so don't sweat that. Trust me, I have been dealing with a lot of contentious shit lately and for the past 2 years with this book. This is not contentious. This is people talking. So, seriously. So just, yeah.
If I could just chime in briefly, when it comes to language, I definitely feel that the words that, I would want to say society, but just really I mean white people use to describe what goes on. The words that are used are kind of like intentionally chosen to sort of like soften the emotional blow that I think like they feel when they talk and think about it, right? I mean, like I would say like, you use the term like white privilege. Myself, I kind of prefer like white terrorism because like I kind of feel that's a more accurate depiction. But even to go back on the conversation earlier, Vickiss, believe you and Vickiss were talking about gentrification. I would actually call it ethnic cleansing. I live in the Bay Area, and what's happened here over the last 10 years, you look at a city like San Francisco, maybe even going back like further than 10 years, like you had, very diverse like ethnic sub-neighborhoods, particularly like the Fillmore district. And now because of quote unquote gentrification, those black people who used to live there, now they either got like bought out, they can't afford to live there, shady deals with different tenants, the details of like how they did it, they may not have like came in with like stormtroopers and, Zyklon B, but the result's the same. Now the city is definitely much more ethnically homogenous than it was before. But when you're looking at it from like a person of color, like they're like practically speaking, like there's really like not much difference for us. You can call it gentrification, you can call it ethnic cleansing, but for us, it's the same. The message is clear and the outcome's the same. Like we don't want you living here, so you won't. But yeah, there's definitely. I feel like there's definitely, especially when it comes to liberals and progressives, they want to choose warm, fuzzy terms that sort of soften the inhumanity of what actually goes on.
Yeah.
So
I won't argue with you there either.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my. This could turn into another reckless, but I think there was some mention about people on like different parts of like the political spectrum. Racism is pervasive, be it you're Republican, be it you're a liberal, a progressive, a Democrat. To be honest, sometimes I feel like I prefer the Republican version more because they're just more outspoken and honest about it. Like if someone doesn't like me, it's because of the color of my skin. That to me is much, well, I wouldn't say much more constructive, but it's more helpful for me navigating like certain waters than people saying, oh, we're going to treat everybody the same, but the reality is like they're not.
Right. I believe I touched on that in one of those articles. I'm not sure if I did, but my audience is really more white liberals, although I don't think they're listening to me. I've had say it again?
Oh, I was going to say, like, I absolutely agree. The white liberals that I've known, that I've talked to, they desperately want to believe that racism is over, and really what that, for me, practically speaking, what that ends up becoming, whether meaning aside, is please keep quiet while I keep practicing racism and keep enjoying the benefits of being white.
Yeah, I think that's true. And, it's kind of what's been the most troubling to me about this whole thing. I mean, I've had a couple of scary. I mean, I'm not asking. This is somebody. Even when I told them this story, said, "You're telling me about suffering. You're not an African American." I understand that in this context, but I've had some scary people kind of communicating with me after this whole thing. But that's not what troubled me the most. What's troubled me the most is only out of the, hundreds, if not thousands, of people who've supported what I've done, I've only had 2 white people say, "This has made me think." 2. And that's, I just think, the dismantling of institutions, we got to be conscious. White people got to be conscious every step of the way, and that's what I want to do.
Yeah, and I What I would challenge is, there's sort of like an implication, like when you say like we need to be conscious, we need to be aware that the people who don't want to like talk about racism like aren't aware of like what's happening. I would challenge that notion. I'm pretty sure you've probably read these articles, but now there's some data coming out on just how big the economic disparity is between being an African American, being Latino, being white. But it basically comes down to like almost $100,000 per household if you're white versus if you're African American, or Latino. And I put myself in the shoes of a white liberal or a white progressive, and someone telling me like, well, we need to dismantle the system that ultimately like has given me like $100,000 of net worth that I didn't even have to like work or fight for, right? Like you're born and like you get this. Like why would they want that to end? Like you may not want to feel bad about how you got it, but you still want those benefits.
Yeah, and I definitely fall in that category. Yeah. But I don't think that I don't know if you read what I wrote back to D-Train, but I'm very aware that being a white man has worked in my favor.
Yeah.
But I still busted my ass, came from pretty modest roots, so I don't want to demean people who work hard, because I work hard and all of that. But what I believe, you and I differ, I'd say, most drastically in this sense, which is you're more of an absolutist than I am. And my main trade as a fiction writer is not being an absolutist, because I've got to look at people as individuals and make my political implications from there. That's kind of the way I approach things. But I think what could happen in this country is, everybody can share this huge amount of money we have.
Yeah.
And just in simple, I'm not telling you guys, again, I feel like I'm saying stuff that's obvious to y'all. I don't mean to be doing that, but just, the shit like, one of the main things that the right-wingers throw back at me immediately, which is another justification, is like, what about all the blacks killing each other in the city? Well, first of all, I said, let's take a look at this. If there were if one person was shot in a white suburb, a white kid, well, we don't even talk. Well, let's not even talk. Well, what this do? A black kid shot a white kid. That place would have so many cops, you couldn't move around.
Yeah.
Last weekend in Chicago, as y'all know, there were 10 people killed.
Very aware.
Yeah. The first step, I'm not going to get into all the, the problems with police, which we know, but the first step should be that place should be frickin' flooded with cops to protect I think the first step, to protect the 99% of people there who don't want to get shot. And then, we start working toward, but that's just a quick point I'm making, is we can't even make that commitment at a resources and economic level.
Yeah.
Much less working for, economic justice.
So, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but I would challenge the notion that the solution is to have like more cops. I think like the biggest issue is just a fundamental lack of value for black life. And if you don't actually like fix that from societal level, you flood in cops, and next thing you know, you're not going to have fewer murders. You're just going to have more Freddie Grays.
No, actually, I was making your point. Because I started off, I was long-winded. I'm just saying at the level of resources, comparing what would happen in a white neighborhood, just the first step, not even going to the level of trying to get, financial and social equality, but just even that step can't happen.
Yeah, and you would need a mayor or politicians, or at least like some will among the people who have resources to do that, and that doesn't exist.
Right.
Right, and that's because to those people in power, like those lives like aren't important, and they're just voicing that. Well, they're just voicing that opinion with their pocketbook.
Yeah. Yeah, it's awful. I agree.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard, Tim? Have you ever heard your parents or yourself or anybody saying that black people drag down property values?
Yeah, and that's. Let me tell you what happened in my neighborhood, and I deal with this some in my book. So again, we lived about a mile and a half from the Mississippi River, and it was a working class neighborhood, and all white. I had a Hispanic friend, but for the most part it was Germans, English backgrounds, and a lot of Cajuns and Italians. But then when I was really in junior high, African Americans started moving away from the river into toward our neighborhood. There was this weird demarcation line, but you could see white flight happening. It was like mushrooms sprouting up the for sale signs in every neighborhood. You'd have one black family move in, and boom, whites were trying to get out of there. And so in a way, I mean, they're economists and sociologists who can explain it a lot better, but the property values do drop because it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. And when I was talking, I'm thinking the thing I wrote you and something I talk about a lot is you get this drain of money. The property values drop, first of all, because of the economic institutions. Again, you've got this institutional racism. If you have, especially back then, if you have African Americans moving in and people are trying to get out, the property is going to be devalued in any sense by the amount of money the bank is going to be willing to give an African American to buy a house. And then in those days when segregation was still, almost a lawful statute still, people just weren't going to have. They didn't have much access to money. African Americans. They had shitty jobs, and so property values did drop, but it was kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then you get people. I mean, it really gets. I just say the last thing. I mean, there's a sort of apartheid that works still in America, as y'all know. You get neighborhoods of African Americans, and multitude of reasons, which I'm sure y'all can articulate better than I can. There's just not as much money flowing in ways that they will flow in white neighborhoods.
The reason I asked that is because there was an article in the Washington Post maybe about 2-3 weeks ago. I'm looking it up right now. Okay, it says the title of the article is "Poor Whites Live in Richer Neighborhoods Than Middle Class Blacks and Latinos." And basically, the gist of this article is that the median home prices in white neighborhoods of a certain income level is, the house values are almost double that of So let's say a black family makes $80,000. Their house will be worth approximately one half of what the white people's house value is. So anyway, I found this to be a very interesting article, and I always hear it framed in the term of black people deflating property values. And I wondered if you heard anybody ever theorize or if you think that it may be valid to say that white people artificially inflate property values just because being white is kind of a commodity. And it's you're highly valued to be white and to be around other white people, and people can say the schools and you can say all you want, but you can find black neighborhoods that have decent schools, a low crime, and you control for all of that, and these neighborhoods still have less value than and I mean this kind of goes to what Player Hater was talking about in the literal sense of the devaluation of black life, and whether you thought what I was saying was accurate or if you had any qualifications to it.
No, I do think it's accurate. Let me tell you about my neighborhood. So I wanted to buy a house, and I wanted to be close to the place I teach. So I bought a house in a neighborhood I can walk to work in about 25 minutes. And, I've only lived in this town for 10 years. I didn't know the history of it that well, but it turns out this was, back in the day, whenever that was, I don't know, 50s, 60s or whatever, a predominantly Italian working class neighborhood. And now it's a predominantly African American neighborhood. And it's very much like the working class neighborhood I grew up in. So when I'm at parties with people from Hamden, the place I live, with white people who now live in the more expensive section of town, and I tell them where I live, sometimes their jaws literally drop. Now this is one of the safest, most stable, friendliest neighborhoods I've ever lived in. But there's that stigma even now. And the other thing, I'll tell you about this. I've been here 10 years, and I see people move out. And I'll see white people move out sometimes. I almost never see white people move back in. And that can't be completely that white people are in the same economic stratum, That's what you're saying. There got to be some other reasons for that as well, and it's the stigma of, people of color,
I think it's mostly the stigma, but I think that the white people are also thinking about their pockets as well. I mean, if you can go, and just basically, a lot of white people have, more favorable circumstances than non-white people, and the fact that, their parents can maybe gift them a couple of $1,000s for a down payment on a house, or
I totally agree with you.
They have less, or they have less student loans, so fewer student loans, to be grammatically correct. But that they can afford to go and buy, a $300,000 house when, the house was, $150,000 before, and it makes a better investment for them, because when they go to sell that house in 5-10 years, they're getting $350,000, $400,000 for it. Whereas in that black neighborhood, you might just get your money back. So it definitely goes into the devaluation of black life in the most literal sense.
It does. I agree with you.
Vic, did you have a question?
Oh no. Let's see. I had a couple of them. Yes, I wanted to ask Mr. Parrish, do you believe that it is an act of racism for white people to insulate themselves and to hoard the resources and to have these whitelandias and white-topias, and to even try to petition to have an all-white state? Do you believe that these are acts of racism?
Yes.
Oh yes, and let's see. And would you now yourself, and you've also, I've seen in your article that it's something that people you've been indoctrinated with, and you said that you're even still indoctrinated with it. So are you a racist currently? And do you are you a racist?
No, I say, and I know you're probably going to quibble with this, but that's okay. I have no problem with that. I am wired with the racist stuff that I grew up with. It's still in me. It's not in me as powerfully as it once was. But I don't consider myself a racist now, because when those things come up, I don't act on them. And I know that it's a certain kind of programming, just like any kind of prejudice is programming, even though I know there's a difference in just any prejudice and racism. But I think that racists act with the belief. They follow through on their beliefs, even if they don't express them. If it somehow influences them in what they do, the way they vote, the way they move, I think that they're still a racist at some level. So I would say, it's more in the act than in the programming. But you could go the other way if you say this is like alcoholism, and it's something that a person just has a proclivity for. In a lot of substance abuse places, they say, well, you're always an alcoholic. So somebody could call that. But I find the need to make a distinction, and it may just be a rhetorical strategy on my way, but I don't feel like I act out as a racist.
Well, I didn't ask if you were acted out as a racist, and also you did say that you had a physical reaction just as the sight of non-white people, just as a sight of a black person, just anxiety and things of that nature. But you don't consider yourself a racist, but you just have these these inherent embedded urges, natural urges about whether it's from your indoctrination or it's just the society around you, or if it's just something you're born with. That's something that you still have in you, but you don't. You're telling me that you still don't consider yourself a racist. Okay.
Yeah, well, Gus had this conversation with me, or not conversation. He excoriated me over that for 2.5 hours. So I'm acquainted with your argument. Suspected turned into confirmed on the website. But let me ask you this, because I do. Here's a place where I despair a little bit at sort of, I think, what I would classify a kind of separatist philosophy that you have. Do you have any prejudices?
In terms of, well, everybody has prejudices. Like, what do you mean when you say,
Okay, well, because I'm not going to compare. I'm just going to ask you this.
Okay.
Can I ask you a question?
You can ask it, but we're really here to ask you questions. You're the white person, and you're the person that we are trying to get information from. But go ahead, you can ask your question.
Okay. So, what purpose does it do? What does it serve besides just having a sort of sweeping definition that all white people are party to white supremacy? If you can't look and say some white people may have been indoctrinated with racism, or most white people have been indoctrinated with racism, but they are not racist anymore, and in fact are striving for social justice and are trying to ally themselves with black brothers and sisters, as I feel I am.
I will take that question after you do, Vic. But my own, go ahead, and then I'll give my thoughts.
If I could chime in, I think the danger of at least some of that philosophy is that, especially like from what I've experienced in living in, sort of like a white liberal, white progressive wonderland, is that once people sort of have that mantra and have that idea, then they stop trying. They think problem solved. I'm not racist, even if these other people might be racist.
I don't believe that.
You may not believe it, but from sort of a structural systems perspective, I think that's a very dangerous idea to have. That once people start thinking I'm okay, I'm cured, they stop trying, and that's especially what I've experienced here. So,
but you were pushing me. You were pushing me on something else.
Oh, me?
Because you were pushing me specifically, and your point. And I understand your point, and it seemed exactly like Renegade T's point.
Hold on, Tim.
Yeah.
That was Player Hater that just interjected. That was our caller. That was not. That was not our other host.
Do what?
Just to clear up confusion. That was our other caller. That wasn't the co-host.
Oh yeah, that was a Player Hater that responded.
Sorry.
No, I'm talking about the conversation I had on the radio with him a couple of years ago.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, just now the guy that asked that was the caller again?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I didn't know
caller.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I left the caller's line up.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry about that.
Yeah. Actually, let me, I hate to answer a question with a question, but do you feel that someone can benefit from systemic and institutional racism and not be racist?
Yes.
How does that work?
Well, again, by by the circumstance of their skin. I mean, unless I were
right,
willing to renounce. Oh, do you want me to answer it?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. Unless I were, akin to Jesus and willing to renounce all worldly possessions and goods, then I don't see how I could completely remove myself from this implied racism you're talking about, because I'm benefiting from racist institutions. Because every institution in the United States has every white institution, which is most institutions, has some racist history.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say not just racist history. A lot of them still actively practice institutional.
Oh, hell yeah.
Racism.
If I could interject for one second.
But then, how does, to me, just even, intellectually speaking, that doesn't compute, because, by definition, right, those systemic forms of racism, they exist, and those benefits, not just they exist, but those benefits that are given to those benefits that are handed out, that, yeah, sorry.
If I can interject for 1 second, we have 1 minute left in the live stream. We do have another caller, but, if you wanted to call in, you have to call in about 45 seconds. The call-in line is 917-889-2965. Back to you, Claire.
Oh, yeah. To me,
this is the example I would use.
Okay.
Okay, I've been a school teacher for 30 years.
Right.
My first high school teaching job was in a predominantly African-American school, where I learned a great deal, first of all. And I'm still very close to a lot of my students. But they also say that I gave them a lot. And I think I have been a good teacher for those 30 years and have educated a lot of people, all across the board. Mostly, however, working class people. I've never worked in a high-powered university like Yale or anything. But so what if you follow your argument to the logical extreme that that I'm a racist because I work for racist institutions, I never would have been able to be a school teacher. And I think ultimately I've done more good than I would have done, removing myself from institutions that allow me to carry out the thing that I, am best at.
Yeah, right. So I think there's a distinction. So it's not I work for racist institutions that would make someone racist. It's I benefit from the racism these institutions practice that make me a racist, right? I think
But I do.
Well,
I work for a state, and the state of Connecticut was in part like every other state on the the eastern United States. It benefited from slavery.
Right. But those benefits come from mistreating other people, right? So even if it gets even if people argue it gets diluted down because it's institutional and I'm not the one doing it, at the end of the day, someone is, and I would say you put yourself as an example, you're receiving benefits from actions that have mistreated people of color. How is that? You may not have quote unquote intended to do it, but ultimately at least to me it's the results that matter, right? So how does that how can you receive those benefits and not be racist? Yes, you got into a position, you're able to do a lot of good. I don't know everything that you've done, but even still doing that good doesn't change the fact that position was given created by mistreating other people.
Right. Well, I'll just say this.
Hold on 1 second. Tim, I want to get in your response. I just want to hang on this topic because I think this is I definitely have a response, but I wanted to get to the caller in DC. So if you could, you can provide your response, and then I'll get to the next one.
Wait, hold on.
Go ahead and do the call. The caller's fine. That's cool.
All right. Hold on 1 second. I'll unmute his line. All right. Caller in DC, you're on the air. Hello? Caller in DC? Area code 202. You with us?
Well, I guess they'll put a hand up if they want to join in the dialogue. But yes, thank you for calling in. And yes, sorry for the interruption. But yes, please continue.
Well, this is what I mean. You and I could debate this all night. Your definition, I think, of all white people is that we're racist.
Well,
and so, let me just go forward a second. Go ahead.
I just want to say, and because this is Vickiss here, and I never even got to respond to your, you tennising the question back to me because we got to the heart of if you're a racist or not. I never said that all white people are racist. In fact, we never even talked definitions yet on this program or anything like that. I think might be traumatized or taking past experiences and imposing that or being assumptive or making assumptions. But I never stated that I think that all white people are racist. In fact, that's why I asked you if you were a racist. So
right.
Just that level of defensiveness is something that makes me suspicious that you could be a racist, because that's something that racists do. Is that they get all and try to pull every definition from every liberal book they can to be like, well, I benefit from this, but that's it's but people are still getting their neck snapped. People are still, shooting each other out of confusion. People are still, going to jail and destroyed lives. And this is a worldwide problem that's been going on for hundreds of years prior to slavery. So it's just this really and this is a part of, and I know that a lot of times you go to the Christian rhetoric and, you say it's a Christian thing, a right-wing thing, but what about, what about so-called Jewish white people who practice racism? What about, white Arabs, since even in on the U.S. Census, Arabs are classified as white. There's also, or what about those who are just atheists? And there are just white people who are practicing racism that have nothing to do with religion. And just the fact that you have these inherent, responses and stuff like that, I just think that, it's something that it just makes me very, very suspicious. But that it doesn't mean that you can't and shouldn't be trying to do as much as you can to solve this problem as well. However, it doesn't mean that non-white people and black people in particular shouldn't operate with a level of suspicion because of what is happening to us.
I agree with that.
But yes, you can answer. I know you were going back and forth with a player hater, and yes.
Yeah, I just it's in part a rhetorical issue with me too, and I know this is going to sound like bullshit to you, most likely, but because if I'm getting myself coming back, that's why I'm pausing. It's kind of disconcerting. But if I feel like if I go around and say to people, "You're a racist, you're a racist, you're a racist," for me, it just kind of shuts things down. And so I think part of and I know it's going to sound like rationalization, I would say probably in part it is, because I heard everything you said. I think it's valid. But for me, if the conversation gets shut down, there's not going to be much progress. And even for me, I think I embrace, and like you said, I think I need to make a distinction that I'm no longer a racist. Although what you're saying does strike a chord in me, and I think it's a legitimate argument that I am still a racist. But what fills me with despair, and I think where my main emotional response comes from, is, when I've seen people polarize my entire life, as you have, much more so than I have, but I've been on the end that's inflicting this punishment and experiencing these benefits, and I am motivated by a great sense of guilt, and I want to believe, I think, that my progress has somehow move me out of that category. So I think your psychoanalysis of me is correct. I think the vernacular of classifying all white people, still haven't done that. I'd be interested to know if you thought that, as racist, is a way of kind of keeping us from moving forward. But that's just my opinion.
I have a rebuttal to that. So typically in mainstream American discourse, the white media, et cetera, what has been viewed as a racist and has been viewed as a racist for a very long time is a foaming at the mouth, ultra right wing, somebody who might be in some sort of quote unquote hate group or terrorist organization. And I want to ask you, Tim, if you think that characterization of a racist has moved progress forward in terms of solving the race problem. Just characterizing right wing lunatics basically as racist, them only. If that has helped us solve, or attempt to solve the race problem.
Well, it hasn't. It hasn't been moving very long. The first serious conversation about it was, the Oklahoma City bombings, and then that seemed to kind of drop off the radar. And at first, a lot of people were scrambling to say that Roof's act was not an act of terrorism, when obviously it is an act of terrorism. So I believe it is, and it should be classified that way. I don't think it's really been embraced enough, especially in white society, to make anybody see it for what it really is. So, I hope that people begin to see that, the acts of, violent white supremacy and race hatred are acts of terror.
I mean, that's going in a complete other direction. But let me try to rephrase. So what I'm saying is that, first, what you said is that that labeling, I guess, regular mainstream white people as racist would be non-productive to the conversation of solving the problem of racism. What I'm saying is I think the opposite. I think that just labeling people who are in the KKK or neo-Nazis or skinheads, that has been counterproductive in terms of solving the problem of racism. There's always been this idea in America of so-called racial moderates, people who are not racist, white people, and some of these people were even slave owners, or they exploited black labor, or other non-white people. And these people were, known as racial moderates because they didn't believe in inflicting, large degrees of severe violence against people of color. And what I'm asserting is that I think Americans have been trying for, since this country has existed, to only look violent, like direct violence, or far right groups as racist. And I mean, there's been, 225 or 250 some odd years of experience saying that does not work. That maybe we do need to expand our definition of who is a racist in order to make some real progress. So what do you think about that?
I think it's a completely legitimate point. I think y'all are making completely legitimate points. They're definitely, it's striking some chords in me. This is, just like for y'all, this isn't an abstract conversation for me. It's a deeply personal conversation, and y'all are making really good points, and some of them are just stirring me up. But I feel like, we're having a good conversation. So I agree with you. A lot of shit's going on in my head right now. I'm sorting through a lot of stuff. I'm taking it in, guys. I'm taking it in.
So are we. Pause. Yes, actually, I do have a question. Speaking of conversations, what are your thoughts on Mr. Gus T. Renegade? His name is Gus T. Renegade in the Cows. I know you were a guest on his program previously, and you've had some things to say, on the side, some snide remarks about him. Who,
No,
yes,
I don't think they were snide. I think they were very direct.
So, yes, well, what are your thoughts on Mr. Gus T. Renegade and the Cows program and your experience on that program?
Well, I think, first of all, he misrepresented himself before I went on that show. And I probably still would have gone on his show if he told me that I was a suspected racist and that he was going to really, first of all, he never did what y'all have done. This is an extended conversation, not an interview. He would not respond at all to anything I asked him back. And his show was very carefully scripted to reach an agenda. He was not interested, I don't believe, in getting any information from me or having a conversation. And I didn't feel like anybody came out of that show any more enlightened than we went in. But one thing that really repulsed me about Gus is I believe that Gus is a horrific misogynist. And the level of attack, I know he tried to, confine it to white women, but I found him really to be a misogynist. I also thought that he was pretty manipulative to bring that child on and have her ask scripted questions. So I had some real issues with him. I think he's a man it's his business is completely controlled by his anger. And like I said to y'all in my message, if I'd grown up African American in this country, I'd probably be dead or in prison because I've always been an angry person. But I just don't think Gus's show was fair, and I don't think it did anything positive or good.
Okay.
That term fair.
Wow. That term fair.
Let me comment before. Yeah, let me
at a human level.
You go.
Well, D-Train, I'm the one who asked the question, so I want to just before you, and I'll just wow. Well, yeah, go ahead, D-Train. Just want to say wow, but go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be discourteous. Go ahead.
Oh no, I just of course, one, that word fair. Two, just some of the language that you just used repulsed his anger. He's misrepresenting himself. He should have told you that you are a suspected racist. I think you're a suspected racist. If I am suspicious of you that you could be a racist, then you're a suspected racist. And to me, yes, you are a suspected racist. So for you to have such an adverse, reaction to a non-white person who was asking you questions, because you shouldn't be trying to get information out of us. We're the ones who are being mistreated. So if any non-white person is asking you a question and you're trying to throw it back at them, that's a tactic that white people use to try to have tangents, to get information out of non-white people, to learn how to practice racism better, to confuse that non-white person, to just really get off topic. Oh, well, what do you think? Well, we should, as if we're on a slave plantation, if the slave master is going to be, it's not going to be, oh, well, let me ask, you questions. They're not going to be asking questions of the slave. It's just, we're in a situation where we're being mistreated. We're in a situation where we're being dominated. So therefore, if we should be asking you questions because you are the expert on racism, and therefore, to say that you're so repulsed and use that such foul language, of a victim of racism who's just trying to get information from you and ask questions. I think that is it certainly makes me highly suspicious. And just to have this. And it's just you and just white people. A lot of white people in general have just the quick, the quick notion to jump to, you must think all white people are racist, and really have to harp on that as something that's that's that a non-white person hasn't even said. And I think also I just want to note that it's dangerous. Just as you were mentioning before, I think it's dangerous for a lot of non-white people to not be suspicious and to hear, I'm not really a racist because of X, Y, Z, and because I don't act on these urges and that. Because also non-white people hear that and they're certainly going to listen to you before they're certainly going to listen to Tim Wise before they listen to Auguste Renegade, before Tim Wise was exposed. So therefore, giving that notion of comfort to non-white people is also very, very, it's also very, very dangerous, because we could just look at Charleston. If they were suspicious about there was an inkling of suspicion about this kid, maybe there would be people alive today. That were in that situation. Do you think that Dylan Roof could have walked into the Nation of Islam or a mosque or something like that, and somebody wouldn't immediately be suspicious? So there's certainly just things that there needs to be if there was a high level of suspicion, that white people, if a white person has the ability to practice racism, they more than likely are racist, and just in general they benefit from racism. So why would a white person voluntarily have to have a conversation with other white people like everybody doesn't know what F is going on, when everybody is bred into everybody, mothers, fathers, brothers, his entire family meetings, racist jokes. It's on television, it's in every form of white culture and media, but yet you have to have a conversation with white people to tell them that they're racist, and not, you think that the conversation will shut down if you call them a racist. They know that they're racist. So there's no reason, it's a game. And, a lot of non-white, a lot of white people, and I'm not saying you in particular, but certainly like Tim Wise and she's slipping my name, but it was our last guest, Miss D'Angelo, people who are benefiting financially from speaking about racism. A lot of people who do that. So there's like less suspicion of them, and while they're taking advantage. And I'm not lumping you into that group of those anti-racist whites, but I am saying that having that suspicion is very important.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I heard what you said. I didn't agree with all of it, but the one thing I'll go back to, there is all of the things we're talking about with racism. You're talking about it. That's true. I would say one thing though, that I'm here to teach you about racism, I don't think is right at all. What white person can know more about racism than an African American? And that's why I want to ask people questions as people, especially in an extended interview like this, because I want to get information, because I'm talking to you as a person to a person. And I think that level, I really do think it's important to see people face to face and to speak to people as individuals and not just as object lessons. So I think that I disagree with you about the listening part. And I just believe, I do believe you guys have treated me with a lot of respect. I think it's important to treat people person to person with respect. And that's just a basic tenet. I have been accused, by the way, of profiting from this. And, I have made a couple of $1,000s, so I can be lumped into that category as well.
Well, there you have it.
I hope. Can I just say this to you, Vickiss? I just really, I don't know you. But I hope you can. I'm not trying to preach to you, and I know you're going to be offended by this. But I just hope you don't let anger just rule you. I hope that's not what's going on, because I can tell you from experience, I'm serious, man. It's ruinous, and I understand. How anger can take root, but I
just think it's very okay. Well, I think that it's just very interesting. Well, I just think that it's very interesting that that you're putting emphasis on anger, and then just having anger rule me like I'm just so emotional, and things
You're
like
not?
that.
You're not. You haven't been emotional on the tirade you went on at me a minute ago. That wasn't emotional. I respect your emotion. You're telling me you're not emotional about this?
I'm just responding. I'm just responding to you actually, and I'm being very.
So you weren't emotional.
I wouldn't say that now. I think you could be practicing racism right now. I'm just saying.
Well, maybe I could, but I could also be practicing human man-to-man talk.
I'm certainly thinking you could be practicing racism right now.
But you're dodging. I mean, I think you could be practicing evasion too. When I try to interact with you as a person. I mean, is it racism to ask another person, to show concern for another person? Is that also part of the structure you're talking about? I don't think it is. I'm not being paternalistic to you. I'm trying to show you respect. And I think you misrepresented a lot of what I said a minute ago because you were fired up, and rightfully so, because you believe in what you're doing.
Well, I do think that it could be an act of racism for a white person to say, "Oh, well, you're just being emotional," and
That's not what I said, buddy. That's not what I said, bud.
And just and things like that is a bit of the condescension, and it's there's nothing to be contentious.
I am not condescending to you. I am not condescending. You and I, you've now severed contact with me as a person. I am now, I feel like, representative of something. And that's okay if that's what you want to do. But you're now levying accusations against me that I don't think are happening. I don't think it's what I'm doing. And I mean, your laughter, you're talking about my condescension and my snide remarks. I have not been snide in this show. I have not laughed condescendingly or dismissively, and I think you've been consistently doing that for a few minutes now, and I just don't think that's a good way to go about business.
Oh no.
Oh man.
We'll see. Yeah. So this is the thing. So I don't think Victor was being emotional in his last statement.
Seriously, D-Train. I mean, come on, guys. Really?
Yes. Seriously. I mean, these are all observations. I mean, I've witnessed the same. I have the same observations being affected for white people, and it didn't.
You're not pissed about racism? You're not pissed about racism? Because I'm pissed about racism.
It's not about, well, the thing, it's not something to be emotional about. It's the fact of reality. Just because I'm speaking, this is, just because I'm speaking about it. I'm not cursing. I'm not, yelling. I'm not calling you names. I didn't call, I'm not, saying you're a separatist and I'm not, calling you names. It was just speaking to you, and I was being long-winded, just like you were previously. So to really, so for you to really say that you're being an emotional Negro when I'm trying,
I didn't say that, man. I did not say that. That's really out of line.
You didn't say that specifically. I'm saying this is how this isn't to imply and to really to say, oh, you're being emotional. You're really being emotional about this. Is really, I don't know. It could be an act of racism. I'm highly suspicious of that. I've never called you a racist. I say I'm highly suspicious.
Do you think I'm a racist? Do you think I'm a racist? Do you think I'm a racist?
I suspect that you are.
Okay, well I'm right then.
Well,
I suspect that you are. I don't think, I suspect that you are, but I'm not calling you on. I just, based upon our conversation and just, even with yourself, even in your article on the Daily Beast about I'm indoctrinated with this, and every white person is indoctrinated and benefiting from this, and for you just saying, oh, you're just being so, emotional about that, and the thing is, people are dying, and people are, are getting their tracheas crushed, and and things like that on a daily, weekly, yearly basis, and I just to say, oh, you're just so so angry about it when, there's not, it's not just.
Not what I did. You're simplifying what I said.
One, I'm talking, and
Sorry.
So saying that I'm angry, you're so angry about it and things like that. That's very condescending, especially to someone who's speaking about this who has a body of knowledge and who is a scholar on the topic, and still, you're just being so emotional when this is something that I study and have been doing for years. So therefore, just to be like, just don't let anger guide you when it's when it's scholarly work, research, speaking to people who have more credentials than you about this topic that are white. And for you to say, don't let anger motivate you and to bring it to that level, I find to be racist. And that's my opinion.
Well, I apologize for saying that.
Well, I would equate it to this. Have you ever heard other white people saying that, they're just being oversensitive? Anytime something racist happens, black people are like, this is racist. And then the other white people are like, you're just being oversensitive. What you did a whole bunch like what other white people say when they call out racism. Does that make sense?
I dropped the middle of what you were asking me, D-Train. Sorry.
What you just said sounded a whole bunch like when other white people say when any racist incident happens and black people complain about it or analyze it or anything, and they say, you're being oversensitive. To me, what you just said sounded like, you just a black person being oversensitive, and that's what it sounded like to me.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm done.
Okay. No, yeah, I totally understand that, and that's also whenever a white man says that to anybody who's not another white man, there's a legitimate argument to be made. I know for a fact just now that was not a racist act because I think I'm pretty aware of when I'm doing it. So, but I do see those homes are getting those homes are getting me sometimes too. So, I thought that Vickiss was angry because a lot of what you responded to me with, Vickiss, I didn't say and didn't believe and haven't represented in this conversation. And what I worry, what I don't like to have happen in any situation is that you bring in a schematic for, say, this is what a white person does. And then you're just waiting for me, just in the way any stereotype works, and which I talked about earlier tonight, for me to say something that fits into your schematic. Because at that point, you're not talking to a person. You're talking to a representative. And if that's what you want to talk to, that's fine. But I'm trying to talk to y'all as a person to two people. So that's my conviction. So.
Well,
and you do have a lot more expertise than I do.
And we do try to keep a level of professionalism on this program, and this is a radio interview, not a just an elevated, expanded discussion. But we are interviewing you. We're not no one's asking calling Anderson Cooper buddy and things of that nature. So really we're really trying if we're being long-winded and things of that nature. We're still being courteous. We're not yelling at people or calling names. So it's again, I think it was an act of racism for you to really respond. Or don't let anger guide you and things of that nature. That's something that, again, it's not even anything that's original because it's something that I've heard tons and tons of white people say. Don't let your anger guide you and this and that. Don't let your anger guide you when people are shooting up churches. What? But just because I'm talking about it, I'm sitting here on a couch talking. And I'm this is not, I'm not, so, but but I'm so angry and emotional, and don't let that guide me when I'm at when I and several of the listeners and people on this line work very hard to gain knowledge about this, to gain knowledge about this subject. So we have you on here to get knowledge from you. You're the author. You're the one writing for the Daily Beast. You're the one with the body of work who is supposed to be sharing what they do, not asking us to trip us up and find out and get information about us so you can perfect your craft. We're not interested in perfecting your craft. We're interested in getting information so that our non-white listeners can hear the perspective, they hear your views and perspectives, and to hear the work that you've done. That's why we have you on, not for other for other reasons. But yes, that's why we have you on.
Okay. Well, do you have any other questions?
I do have one more question, if you can.
Okay.
Well, hold on. Well, let's try to call up from DC back. It does not have to stand up, he or she, but I'm going to see if they have a question anyway. Call up from DC. You are on the air. If you have a question.
I guess they're just listening.
That DC line is
just listening. Okay. So, hey, maybe it's the Fed. Who knows? I want to get back to this whole thing about general. You said something about generalizations and it's a stereotype that most white people are racist. Blah 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 blah.
I didn't actually say that.
Can you?
But go ahead. Go ahead.
Can you rephrase what you said, just so I don't for the sake of accuracy, I don't want to misquote you.
Well, go ahead and ask me your question. I'm sorry.
Okay. So my question is, if there are a whole bunch of white people who are around that say they aren't racist, but racist things are still happening to people of color, I guess. Could you give me a suggestion on how to discern who is racist and who isn't? How can there be, so many non-racist white people if, racism is still happening?
Well, I don't say there. The distinction. I tried to explain earlier the distinction I was making, and I told you. I listened to what y'all were saying. Your definition of me is racist, and I don't blame you for being suspicious of me and skeptical of me. So I still think, and I think I'm pretty clear in that writing too, that there's still a huge racist impulse in white America. How you pick them out? We do that. Who's the worst of the bunch? You kind of do it by evaluating what's going on and trying to get through the mask, as Vickiss was talking about. If you think they're probing for a malicious reason, or they're the smiling face that's behind it's got a monster head. I don't think there's any magic formula for it. But I agree. It's a racist culture.
I certainly do. I have another question for you. It actually relates back to what you said. It's touching upon what you said before earlier, just about that there are sexual fears within the white race of specifically black people. What is that exactly? And I guess where does that come from?
Well, again, I really do think you probably have read much more about it than I have. But it becomes, the mythology as I understand it is when it comes from the days of slavery, when there was this paranoia among, white, I hate to, white owners, who were seeing these African-American men there and afraid they were going to do something with their women. And I would imagine that was probably a projection because they were raping African-American women on their plantations, and I think that's proceeded throughout the generations.
Now, I'm not sure if you're aware, but there's certainly a push in a promotion currently of interracial relationships and quote unquote interracial relationships, sex between white people and non-white people, and but there's still you said there's still sexual fears. So how do those two contradictory messages come from white culture, where there's an aversion to there's fears of the black male coming to rape and take our women, but then there's also there's the other side of it where there's breeding fantasies and cuckolds and things of that nature, and they want to say what is why is that in terms of sex, why is there such a big conflict with some of these messages? In terms of
cognitive dissonance.
Because white culture is a myth constructed by white people. It doesn't really exist, because white people are as diverse as any other ethnic group, and their ideas, especially when you've got 250 million or something of them, and people are people. First of all, as you know, race is a construct. It doesn't really exist. This idea of pure white people is ludicrous, and it's there's some people are attracted to somebody's attracted to somebody who is like anything, and that's it. So this myth was built up, and luckily it's dying out as people start to see each other more as people, and I think it's probably going to continue in this country with your generation. I'm assuming y'all are younger than I am. I'm thinking you are.
Yes, I am. Few more
Don't rub it
in. Few more questions before you depart. Number one, I wanted to ask specifically about racial classification. Do you view most so-called Hispanics as white or non-white? And when I'm saying most, like the effective majority of it.
Well, I think that I haven't given it a lot of thought, but Hispanics, I think, for the most part, in my experience, like to be classified as Hispanic. And I don't really think of them as white or non-white, but I believe they are treated as people of color in this country. So I would respect what an individual person told me. That'd be my answer.
In your experience, have most Hispanics, even like the browner skinned ones, have they classified themselves as white or said something to you that made you think that they might identify as a white person?
I never really had that conversation. This is a tangential conversation. I had a friend when I was in school in Alabama, and he was from Spain, and when he went to get a driver's license, they would not classify him as white, which was befuddling to him. But I mean, I haven't really had that conversation with anyone else. So
you're saying that a white male from, I don't know if he's white or not, but a person from mainland Spain in the European continent, they refuse to classify him as white?
Yeah. This was in the 80s.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow, that is interesting. Okay. Next racial classification I'm a little confused about are so-called Arabs. Do most of the Arabs you come in contact with classify themselves as white, or what do you racialize them as?
I don't think of, when I meet people, it's an honest answer. I don't think so much of race. I mean, still with white and black America, I do, because it's the pressing question of our culture. But with
hold on. Let me stop you real quick. So what you just said. So when you see a black person, they automatically, in your mind, this is a non-white person. But when you see a non-white person or a person who might, some people might consider non-white, and they are, not visibly black, you don't think about their racial classification. Is that correct?
Oh, no, I'm aware of color, and I'm aware of ethnicity, yeah.
No, but
I think one should be. Yeah, I know when somebody... Go ahead. Sorry.
But they, I guess people who may be in, quote unquote, the middle, like you don't feel like fit into the binary racial paradigm, I guess is what I'm getting at.
I mean, the only binary paradigm I see them in is I still don't think anybody who's non-white in America has, I'm tired, I'm not sure, has all of the benefits that the majority of white people in America have. I mean, that's the way I would think about it.
Okay. Few more questions. Dylan Roof, I don't know if you saw this interview with his black quote unquote friend.
No.
And this gentleman said that he hung out with Dylan Roof a lot, and he told racist jokes, but he didn't really think he was a racist. I think one of his white friends said this too. But so I guess, like, what is the importance of racist jokes to you, like, in terms of, not to you personally, but, like, what do you think the importance of racist jokes are to support white supremacy, and do you know any racist jokes? And, what percentage of racist jokes to you are, what percentage have you heard that are, violent?
Oh, God, I'm hurt, I still hear them sometimes when I go to the South. Of course, they're, most of those jokes are, I wouldn't say most, they're all a way of demeaning people and, furthering an ideology of supremacy. And I've got this, it's a quick anecdote. I know it's late. You want to hear an anecdote or just somebody I know here?
Yeah, sure.
So I've got a former Jamaican American student, and he married a white woman here, and he would come to talk to me, and he was, every time he would go to one of her family's events, almost all they would do was kind of make racist jokes and then give him the elbow, like, yeah, you get it. And and it's a way I think some of this tonight y'all have brought up that I'm doing as well. But what they were doing was kind of offloading their own guilt and uneasiness onto him in a really disrespectful and wounding way. And so, it's still working. And that's a really complex kind of screwed up psychology that's going on there, but it's also, so it's working in two ways. I'm sure at some level they thought they were, trying to include him and their family dynamic, and at another level they're obviously making him aware constantly that he's the other and that they don't want him around. So they're divorced now.
Whoa. Wow. So I think we have time for one more question. We've got to wrap up the program. Vic, did you want to ask him?
Sure. Yes, actually, in light of the recent Supreme Court decision, what are your thoughts on the LGBT movement, and have you seen any inflation with that and the civil rights movement? And anti-racist movements, or I guess in terms of racism towards black people. Like, have you seen any comparisons, like between about gay people, how they're treated versus how non-white people, black people, and specifically are treated? Have you seen any conflation with that?
Well, I will tell you, the conflation I see is not so much conflation as legitimate, that they are both civil rights issues. But the caveat to that, which I think you'll probably agree with, is there's no civil rights issue that has any analogy to the treatment of African Americans in the United States. Nobody else was owned and, overtly statutorily segregated in this country up until the 60s. So I think LGBT ruling is a great move forward in civil rights. I'm all for it, but it's not exactly the same thing, nowhere near the same thing as civil rights for African Americans.
Gotcha.
Okay.
I would ask you what you thought about that, but now I'm afraid to.
Don't.
Are you homophobic?
No, we're here to ask you questions, not to, we're here to ask you questions, and I just wanted to hear, see if you saw any comparison. I just wanted to get your opinion on just the comparison that people make, that is the exact same problem and same issues that are occurring, and people are being affected the exact same way. That's the only question that I had for you.
Right.
Okay. So I think this was a productive dialogue. Tim, I do thank you for still coming on the program. I know I admitted to you via correspondence that I'm a big fan of the show, and I'm sorry that you don't. Well, I guess I'm not sorry that you don't feel the same way. I mean, that's
about what did you say? Renegade T?
It's Gus T. Renegade.
Yeah. Yes, Gus T. Renegade. I
understand.
Via correspondence that I'm a huge fan of the show. And you still came on and hung out with us. You said you only had 30 minutes, and you hung out for 2 hours and 20 minutes. So I definitely thank you for your time.
Absolutely.
Sure.
And we'll keep in touch. And like I said, this dialogue was pretty productive. So if you're not averse to coming on again, maybe maybe we can chat it up again.
Well, I won't be with this one thing. Can I say this? I mean, you may call me out on it again, but I'm sitting at my house with a telephone. We're on a web show, or stream show from 10 at night till midnight. I don't think it's unprofessional. I've been on a lot of these shows. I think it would be great if I liked when y'all really engaged me and we had a conversation. I mean, if I were a listener, I know I'm going on again, but if I were a listener, I'd want to hear from y'all at least as much as from somebody like me. And I've learned a lot. Y'all have really given me a lot to consider tonight. I greatly appreciate that. So I'd come on again, but I'd want us to talk.
Gotcha. Well,
okay,
I certainly appreciate you being so liberal with your time and coming on and staying for this long when you originally agreed to a certain amount of time. So definitely thank you, and we definitely appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
Thank you. We'll keep in touch.
Okay. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night. Yes.
Reckless 2.0.
2.0. Yeah, I know.
2.0.
That was Mr. Timothy Parrish. Yes, Mr. Timothy Parrish.
Well, before my little boo-boo tonight, I was actually going to go and take a listen to his performance on the cows because I was really interested. And
yeah,
he was so averse to coming on this program.
He was very a little difficult on the cows, but that's how white people operate when they're pushed up against the corner. They start we saw it tonight, and we'll just continue to see it until the system is taken care of.
What I don't get is that Gus treats like every white person on his show that way.
Yeah. You know, like
literally, like unless you're extremely contrite and are begging forgiveness for the wrongs white people have done, like that's what happens.
And the
like,
thing is,
it's a very small amount of research would have shown him that. Although I don't listen to the cow, so I actually don't know what show you're talking about.
Gotcha. Absolutely not.
Oh man.
But I think it's very interesting that he's like, oh, but it's, Gus T. Renegade is so angry and emotional, and like everybody on this, well, at least me, like, you're so angry. Like, why is it that when someone's asking, are you a racist? I suspect that you could be. Like, why is that person being the angry and emotional one when you're asking them a question, and it's just like, they get all dodgy and, they just practice racism.
Yep, definitely. In email correspondence, and I think you saw this, Vic, that I basically told him before he came on the show that I thought he could be a racist. I think today, he may have demonstrated racist behavior. And I broke it down, how, you're being too sensitive, and, that's like racism agency. That's like racism.
Well, yes. Yes, of course it is. And it's like, oh, I don't act on it. He just said, I don't act on it, but then went and practiced racism like 10 minutes later.
10 minutes?
Yeah.
He waited that long?
Okay, it was really long.
But here's the thing.
I'm sorry.
And since I
go ahead. Wait.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I need to go on a tirade. Like, I'm sorry. If there's like systemic forms of like racially motivated abuse that like transfer wealth, jobs, houses, funds from like one group of people to another, and you're sitting there like receiving those benefits, I don't care like what you do like after you get like that pot of gold, like, oh, but look at me, like I saved like all these lives, I did like all those good things. Like, yeah, you did that, but that doesn't mean like you're not racist. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I would never drop that level of suspicion. And like I said, I told him that like up front, before he came on the program. And I definitely, I appreciate his time and all, but like I said, I definitely think that he may have practiced racism on the program. I thought there was a time early in the program where I thought he was mocking Vic a little bit, for his views. He was just like, yeah, whatever. And then he called him Bud. He called him Bud at some point during the interview.
The condescension? Oh, you guys are younger than me. You must be. Like, the condescension, like, but that's how it goes,
Well, and I mean, sorry to butt it, but like D-Train, like, yeah, like you appreciate the time, but what I would appreciate is like that $100,000.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, like, everybody wants to say like, oh, I'm not racist, I'm fighting this, and like, yeah, well then, those benefits that you're getting, like, now we know like what that number is or is close.
Yeah.
Like, how about coughing like some of that up? But nope.
Well, that's when they're going to start getting emotional. That's when the real violence is going to come out.
Is that when they'll get Freddie Grade?
Yeah.
Next snap in the back of a gas fan. Yep, pretty much.
They just stomped on his throat down in the front seat.
Of course.
So can I say something completely random before we get cut off?
Sure.
Tetanus shots hurt like a bitch, man. This is awful. Like, so the reason we came on late and a little bit sloppily, and I explained it a little bit before we got into the interview, is because I cut myself on some glass, and I ran to the hospital. Oh, when is the last time you got your tetanus shot? Like 10 years ago. They gave me one, and that's that's like the shot that like completely like makes your arm almost fall off. So like I'm like trying to run the switchboard, and I have one hand where I have a finger that's in a splint. So because I got 2 stitches, and the other arm I had a tetanus shot. So it's like
but D-Train, I think what you're missing is that tetanus shots, they only hurt if you're soft, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. If you weren't soft, it wouldn't hurt.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. But vaccinations suck anyway. You shouldn't get them ever. That's what some people say. And that is not me. That is not me. I'm skeptical.
Really? Are you gonna back? Really? What are you skeptical of?
I'm skeptical of the timing of the vaccinations. I'm skeptical of, you have to get this at this schedule. But I'm not skeptical of the effectiveness in general.
What do you think about what do you think about people like quote unquote Dr. Umar Johnson who promote anti-vaccination beliefs within the black community?
I'm not going to criticize another victim, but
I will.
So like my son goes to an African center school, and about maybe 40 to 50% of the children there aren't vaccinated. Now, now the evidence shows that these vaccinations. I mean, even if we're going correlation, that these vaccinations are slightly effective because highly effective because a lot of these diseases have went down tremendously in incidence since the vaccination came around.
Well, by tremendously you mean like almost eradicated, right?
There's still like 20,000 cases of measles, measles a year, but I still don't know if I want to, I want to shoot my infant son up with an arm shot. So he's like 2 or 3 years old. I mean, it's a balance for me,